Welcome to the Joy Quota podcast. I'm Dylan Pfohl.
And I'm Gavin Malcolm.
Tonight we have no guest. We are going to talk about the inspiration behind Joy Quota, what joy means to us, and the difference between joy and happiness.
We're really excited to share this with you guys. It's a really big part of what we're trying to accomplish with the Joy Quota mission, and we couldn't be any more pumped to share this with you, so enjoy. Well, hi, Dylan. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm not too bad. It's weird on this side of the table, but I'm getting used to it.
Right. We're usually both on this side, so.
Yeah, it's funny how like your brain will search for any kind of familiar surroundings and how quickly you'll feel uncomfortable over like something this silly, right? Like, just
but it's good to be uncomfortable, right? Isn't that?
I mean, that's
Joy Quota mission.
Yeah, dude. Not to be too cheesy, but for sure. I mean, I think it's hilarious because like you think that you have to do these big, massive things to get uncomfortable, when like literally just like use a different bathroom stall next time you go to the bathroom at work. And like, I bet there's like a weird part of your brain that feels uncomfortable because it's different than the routine. Like, it's funny how easy it is to spice up your life.
Well, yeah, because I always take the same way home, right? And then, like, I almost didn't, and then I was like, I can't do it. And then I cut across 3 lanes of traffic to get to the exit of right, and then, it literally doesn't matter, but.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I specifically took a different way home tonight for that exact reason. I literally was like, I'm not going to use the highway. I'm going to take the back road. It might be longer. It might be faster. I don't know. But I've taken the back way like 12 times, or the highway 12 times in a row. I'm just going to go a totally different way this time, just for the sake of life needs variety. So that's funny that we both took each half of the fork in the road.
I know. Well, because there's the gamble on the other way that you're going to hit the train. And so I like to play it safe and go the way that takes longer, but there's no chance of a train.
I know what you mean.
That train comes every 15 minutes either way, so it's like 8 times an hour they stop the highway. The
light rail's not too bad. It's just if you get stuck behind like a coal train or like one of the massive BSNF or whatever it is. Because those, I've waited for like a solid 40 minutes, so I know what you mean.
I don't think they do those at rush hour, thankfully, but yeah, they have one
gotten
where
stuck at rush hour on one. Yeah,
it's crazy to me. I mean, we're getting pretty off topic, but like, yeah, it'll be going and then it'll just stop and then start reversing.
Yeah,
and you're like, give me a break.
Yeah,
but usually that's at like midnight.
Yeah, it's so funny.
When all you want to do is be home.
Yeah, it's always when you need to be home. I've never gotten stuck when like I had nowhere to go. It's always like, I have 5 minutes to get home, and then I have to sprint into Allie's car, and we're on to the next thing. And it's always like, hey, just calling you. I'm going to be a while. That's awesome. I mean, more to that effect of doing stuff that's kind of uncomfortable. This is new, of us just having the two of us. I'm excited. I've wanted to do this for a long time, and we haven't really like had a reason or a chance. And so I'm excited because it feels a little weird. And
it definitely is weird. Yeah, usually we're just interviewing our guest, but this will be hopefully fun and entertaining for our audience.
It'll be a learning experience for all of us. Well, yeah, so I guess we'll just get started and tell the story of kind of where this all started. We've known each other since I was a freshman, so that would have been 2007. Okay. Maybe even 2006.
Yeah, somewhere around then. It's a little blurry, but yeah.
Well over a decade now, we've been good friends. And without realizing, I think we've always kind of lived this mission. Mm-hmm. Of just finding joy and like making adventures out of everything.
So I told the story at your wedding, but I don't think I've told it on the podcast of how Gavin was like this annoying little kid at the skate park, like, because I'm significantly older, and so I made friends with some other guys riding BMX at the skate park, And then there's just this like annoying little kid that I honestly don't even remember until it came to one specific trip where we, like, all of our friends were all going up to Boulder, which isn't far, but to us it was like this mission.
I mean, yeah, because you were the only person with a license, and I remember being on the other side. Like, I finally got invited to go on a quote unquote road trip with you guys.
Right, we're driving,
and I'm like
45
looking
minutes,
forward to it for like weeks. Like I'm like, what? I get to go with them. This is the best.
And realistically, it was probably somebody canceled, or we had one extra spot and I needed the gas money or something silly like that. And they're like, oh, I guess we'll invite this kid, and he immediately gets hurt and like wants to go home, and just like, oh, this kid that I didn't want to come in the first place is so annoying, and now he wants to. Well, like, he wasn't saying like, oh, please take me home, but he was just like moaning and like,
yeah, I hurt myself pretty bad. I do remember like that exact thought of like, there's no way the words "will you take me home" is coming out of my mouth. I'm going to sit here and suffer until they are all ready to go.
And I just like tried to ignore it, and I don't know.
I don't think you would have minded. I think it's probably like JT or someone that was like, hey, he's pretty messed up. We should probably take him home.
Well, no, yeah, right. That's what I mean. I like tried to ignore you, like laying in the corner, like moaning in pain. Like I just drove 45 minutes up to the skate park. I'm gonna ride my bike. Yeah, it was a dick. But somehow we pushed through it, and 12 years later, we're best friends and live together and have this. So anything is possible.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny, like, that's where it all started. Like, JT, another person who spoke at my wedding, definitely wasn't a fan of me the first time we met. Really, just about anyone that I met when I was little. I was just too socially unaware of what, like, normal, I guess, like bonds, like social bonds were. So I just like didn't realize that I was just too awkward to notice that I was awkward, right? Like that no one wanted to hang out. I was like, oh, that's fine. I'll invite myself. And just like didn't find it weird. So it's awesome that now like we're still friends, and like it's so funny that that's where it all started.
Yeah, because like I was definitely an awkward kid too, but I knew I was awkward, so that's the difference, right? I guess
I was blissfully unaware of how awkward I was, for sure.
Which is probably the better way, but I guess a different way. There's no.
Yeah,
I don't know.
We both got to the same place. So. Yeah. So I guess that's us being friends for so long.
We've had BMX is kind of what brought everything together in our lives, I would say. Yeah,
it's the like sand of the concrete or mortar that is holding everything together, for sure. It's most of it.
We have, especially now, many other interests, but yeah, that is the catalyst, if you will.
Yeah, and so we rode bikes together for a long, long time, and we'd go to little 45-minute road trips, and eventually over time, like, we would end up building a giant skate park at his parents' house. We had a half pipe and a box jump at my house. We were just constantly, if we didn't have what we wanted, we would just go find a way to make it happen. And
so we had a real ghetto skate park in the town of Parker.
Now it's like the best one ever, but we grew up with, those kids know nothing.
Right, yeah.
The kids in Parker don't know what it was like back in our day. It's uphill both ways to the skate park.
But I couldn't be more thankful for that super ghetto, ridiculously built skate park, because that's how all of my very best friends.
Oh, for sure. If it had been some like giant skate park, it would have been a totally different dynamic, for sure. Because it was so bad, we were kind of isolated from the rest of the BMX scene in Colorado. Like, no one was journeying from Boulder to come to Parker. So, like, if we didn't leave Parker, it was just up to us to make sure we had a good time. and like dealt with the ramps accordingly and all that stuff.
So was the very first adventure day when they tore down the skate park? Do you remember?
So I can't remember if that was the first or the second. I want to say it was the first one. I feel pretty confident it was. And that was by chance. Like that was God's timing for sure, because we didn't know that they were tearing it down. I think we were just like, oh, we should go back. So the adventure day we're speaking of, the link will be in the bottom, but we actually, over the years, found out we were just really good at making anything fun, whether it was sledding, whether it was go-karting. I mean, we're saying fun things, but like, even if it was just hanging with the guys, we would find something crazy fun to do and make something an adventure. Yeah.
We're extra.
We're extra, yeah.
In the parlance of our day.
Woo, nice use of the word parlance. And so we came up with this idea to try and squeeze as many cool things as possible into one day. And so Dylan's dad had a wakeboarding boat, and so did we even do anything before that? I think that was the start of the day.
I think we started at like 7 a.m.
It was
you gotta go.
Butt crack of dawn.
Cherry Creek is a awful, horrible lake that if you don't get there by 7 a.m., the waves are bullshit.
Choppy and you can't do anything. So we end up wakeboarding for a bit and then tubing, and then there happens to be a cool BMX street spot that's like a giant like half pipe on its side, so like an oververt quarter pipe. And we go and ride that, and we do a whole bunch of activities. And at the end of that day, without meaning to, we're like, oh, we should go to the old Parker skate park. It's like a celebration of like, look how far we've come. And it turns out they were actually demolishing it. So like they were halfway
demolished, and then they ended for that day. Yeah, so we got to ride it for the very last time.
Like one big final send-off, which was like really like emotional. Like even thinking of it now, like we spent so much of our life there.
Right, and they turned it into a parking lot. That's kind of the bummer to me about it. Like you could have literally done nothing and left it there and it would have been fine.
Yeah.
It's a parking lot for the backside of a baseball field that already has a parking lot on the other side. So yeah, I guess I don't understand.
It seemed unnecessary, but it's so that's kind of where the idea for Joy Quota started. Before we had Joy Quota as a means of describing what we were doing, it was making sure that we were taking our joy seriously, that we had like a quota the same way that a salesperson has like a quota that they have to meet for each day or for each week of sales or calls, or there's some amount of trackable data that's like, I'm on track. I'm actually doing what I'm supposed to be doing. That was kind of when we started realizing like joy is something that we can on purpose figure out how to create kind of whenever you need it. It wasn't until probably 5 years later that we came up with the idea for Joy Quota and all of that, but that's really where the whole idea started. And then it wasn't until last year that what you guys are seeing now, kind of came to fruition.
Well, even then, only this year has the podcast come about. But at first, Joy Quota was going to be our DJ name. We were going to learn how to...
Yeah, that's right.
Before we had a YouTube channel and a podcast, we were going to become DJs. And I still hope someday maybe we can do that. But that was going to be our DJ name. We were going to learn how to remix angsty teen music of the 2000s into dance music and call ourselves Joy Quota.
Even and just hearing you say that,
want to do that.
My heart is so happy.
And we've talked about it on the podcast even, but it's just so... We underestimated how hard it is to actually...
be a good DJ.
Yeah. But I would really like to do that still. It'd be really fun.
Yeah, that's for sure.
One day when we can devote some actual time to it. When we're too old to actually go to the parties that we want to play.
That's awesome. Yeah, that'd be perfect. Phase out of that in our like late 50s. We're like DJing.
Oh my gosh.
So nuts.
Well, because if we could do it in the next few years, it would still be like
relevant.
Funny and relevant.
Yeah.
Otherwise, when in 20 years, well, maybe it'll be classic pop punk rock.
Yeah. Not your grandpa's Blink 182. Yeah, so that's really where Joy Quota started, and this year we really flushed everything into what you're seeing now of like the podcast and the videos. And
well, because we started, and then after a month Gavin broke his collarbone, and then that was kind of on hold, and we were just like in a different place, and we couldn't
we weren't
continue
really...
And so we got distracted, and then this year we're like serious about it.
Yeah, absolutely. That brings us to now. So that's kind of, there's all sorts of awesome stories over the years that we could tell. There's a bunch of awesome podcasts you guys can listen to hear about those. Today we just kind of wanted to talk about joy and kind of define it a little bit, at least for us, and what it means to fill your joy quota, and go through the difference between joy and happiness, because that's a really big part of finding joy and filling that joy quota and meeting it, is recognizing what it is so that you actually know what you're looking for.
Well, and understanding that it's a choice, I think, is a big... we were talking about it the other night, and I didn't even know. We've been doing this for however long, and I didn't recognize the difference between joy and happiness, which I think a lot of people probably don't. And it's pretty important that joy, you have to choose. You have to choose to be joyful. Happiness can come from just an experience, like you go ride your bike or go go-karting or whatever thing you do, and you be happy for a moment. But if you're not feeling joy, then it's just going to be a fleeting moment.
Yeah. Happiness is something that happens to you versus joy is something you choose, right? Happiness is a very externally triggered event, right? Oh gosh, you gave me a compliment, right? Versus joy is, it's always a choice, and oftentimes it's a hard choice. Like the important times for joy, right? Like it's easy to choose joy when everything's going great and you have no problems and money's in the bank and Tinder's blowing up or whatever. Like it's pretty easy, right? But if you can choose joy when you're bored and maybe there's nothing to do, or like lately I haven't been able to ride my bike because of another crash, and finding ways of like creating joy without going to the normal go-tos, right? Like I could be pretty bummed and sitting at the house, even though I'm feeling sad, like I'm in a joyful state, if that makes sense. Like I'm choosing joy despite my emotions is kind of how I can tell the difference. Like there's almost like a peace or like a contentment or fulfillment in my mind when I think of joy, that despite whatever emotion you're feeling, you're still living in a joyful state, if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, and all of this is easier said than done. It's not easy to choose joy, I feel like. I mean, for some people maybe, but when you are down and sad, to choose to feel joy is hard. It's really hard. I know, because like I, especially lately, like feel down or sad a lot just based on like external factors, like just the typical money and girls and all the bullshit. Like, so you feel down, and then trying to choose joy through that is difficult, but important. It's very important. I think that's the difference, like, of well, I don't want to get too deep, but like depression is when you can just see no joy, maybe.
Yeah, I think
versus,
yeah,
I don't know, just feeling sad is just feeling sad.
Yeah, like that was a big journey for me as well, because I think that, I mean, we talked about this with Alex on his podcast. A lot of people look at me because I am like a really happy and joyful and like bubbly and extroverted person. A lot of people are like, yeah, well, it's easy for you to be joyful and fun. Like, look at you, like, which I can kind of understand, but it is very much a choice. And like, we really only know, like the brain only perceives by, or the brain only learns by perception of a difference, right? So like the only reason that I know what it's like to feel really joyful all the time is because I spent a large part of my life feeling a whole myriad of really negative emotions, right? Like, and I still experience like a pretty big dip every now and again where I'll fight depression for a couple of days, and then, it's again coming back to the choice of like, all right, like I don't want to, but I'm gonna go do something that's going to create joy, right? Like as weird as that sounds, that's at least the thought process in my head, where like I'll be down and it's been a couple days of just kind of feeling hopeless and like lost or frustrated or whatever it is, and then it's almost like the internal dialogue in my head is like, all right, dude, time to buckle the F up, like let's get to it and go find some joy. And I'll go ride my bike, or I'll go work on a project to go help a friend, or like I'll go give back, or really whatever. There's a whole bunch of different tools now and recipes for joy, if you want to call it that now choosing is actually the harder of the process than creating joy. Right? It's the initial choice to create the momentum of actually making yourself feel joyful. Mm-hmm. It's really hard because I think it's kind of a vulnerable moment.
Well, choosing to do something is the most important.
Yeah.
You'll know the Tony Robbins quote of, what is it, like, emotion is motion, or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, so you just...
Motion creates emotion.
Okay. So you just have to do something, no matter what you feel, and no matter how much you don't want to. Like, there's times where I don't want to do anything but sit on the couch, and I'll make myself go do a 30-minute session of yoga with Tim on YouTube, best YouTube yoga teacher ever. And just that 30 minutes, come back and it's like a different person. Like it completely changes you. And, some people aren't into yoga.
Yeah, it can be anything.
But it can be anything. Like, go take a walk around the block and I guarantee you'll feel so much better.
Absolutely. I mean, you said it so perfectly that, like, you just described it as what you were feeling often feels like what is happening to you. Or, like, it feels, like, unavoidable, right? Like, if you're feeling down and you're feeling like you can't get off the couch and just, like, you're so bored or you're so bummed and you're feeling it, because of how most of us relate to our emotions, it feels like something you can't change. Like, it doesn't... We forget that we're in control of feelings, right? Like, that's actually a reaction, or like a response to what we're choosing to do, which is a weird way of thinking of it, but you just described that perfectly. Of, you were feeling down, so you chose to go do something, and then you felt differently, right? Like, we feel like our feelings are, or we tend to believe that our feelings are kind of the end all, instead of like
we control them, like they don't control us. Yeah, that's the most important thing you have to remember, is like you can control your feelings. It feels like you can't a lot of times. And
it's not even
sucks.
to say that they're like not useful or like you should control your feelings so that you never experience them and you're always on top of your game and you always feel a certain way. Like that's impossible and it's totally unhealthy. It's more about using them as like the sign, like there's different flags when you're going around a racetrack that'll tell you like the checkered flag. All right, cool. That's the finish. There's the white
usually
flag.
Gavin gets the blue flag. That means I'm coming to pass him.
Exactly. There's lots of flags. Like there's a red flag that means like, hey, slow down. There's something on the track. Like, or
that's the yellow flag. The
yellow
red flag is
I don't
stop.
know much about racing. But I mean, same principle of that's more what feelings are. Is they're indications of what choices we have been making and what choices we need to be making instead of something that we can't change. I think that's something that's really important to understand. At least it has been for me, is that feelings are an unbelievable tool and you should experience all of them. The sad ones, the happy ones, like you should experience all of them so that you can get them through the system and you become familiar with them so you can quickly realize like, oh, I'm feeling, one way or another, and you can quickly choose whatever action you're looking for next so that you can kind of direct yourself so you're not at the whim of them. Like that's how you control them, is not by choosing not to experience them, but by using them and like reading them as signs almost and saying like, oh, wow, I'm feeling sad. That means this has happened, or like, let me look around and see why. Oh, well, that choice has been creating, I haven't been eating right. So that's actually leading to me not having the energy I need, or like I'm not feeling great about how I'm looking, or like, honestly, I'm not as disciplined as I should be. And so I'm feeling a little bit of shame and all those things. And then you can start making different choices instead of being a victim to them.
Yeah. So you mentioned when you were younger, you were like angry and all these things. Do you remember like what inspired the change? Like for anyone listening that maybe is
he's listening to this and getting angry right now. Like, screw you guys.
No, that's not what
No, honestly, I if someone's out there and they're experiencing like that's so real. I certainly would have felt that if I heard someone who like seemed to be naturally super joyful, like, oh yeah, you just choose joy. Like, oh, punch you in the face if I see you. So yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I get told I have a perfect life, and I feel like I have the most opposite of perfect life. Of any. But anyway, do you remember like what inspired the change of like I need to get better. I need to do something different.
Absolutely. I remember there was 2 really defining moments like that in my life. The first one, I would have been about 6th or 7th grade. And I just remember, or maybe even like, it probably would have been like 6th grade. I went to a small charter school in Parker, and I lived a very sheltered life. Maybe not sheltered in the sense that like I never got hurt or never, anything like that. It was more like I never got socialized because I lived outside of a cul-de-sac, and even though like I went through life, like parents got divorced and all that stuff, like I wasn't sheltered in that sense. It's more like I just wasn't socialized. So I kind of lived in this weird little bubble, and I knew the same 40 kids, kindergarten through 8th grade, the same teachers in the school the whole time, the same staff. Everything in my life was exactly the same the first like 10, 12 years of my life. All the same people, all that stuff. So, and I remember one day making a distinction of like, the reason everyone's acting like I'm weird and that like no one wants to be my friend, and I'm having, which was creating like tons of anger and so much resentment, and I just felt like the world was out to get me, and I really just, I lived in such an angry place, and one day it kind of clicked in my head of, oh, it's me. They're reacting to me. I am doing stuff that is genuinely, like, I'm making it hard for them to be my friend. I'm making myself seem weird and unapproachable. Things like that. And one day, I don't exactly remember what the switch that flipped was, but I very distinctly remember just all of a sudden being floored with this thought of, oh, it's 'cause it's me. And for the first time, it felt like it was something that I could do something about. Because before it was the world's just out to get me.
I mean, that's a pretty harsh realization for whatever you were, 12-year-old or 11-year-old. I mean, and
it's
also
a serious one, because in my mind, it was so hopeful. Like, for the first time in my life, I was actually excited that, oh, if I can get this reaction out of them, I can learn how to get a different reaction out of people. Like, for the first time, I saw that I was in control over how I saw myself, and to some degree how others saw me.
Well, I just mean it's huge that you discovered that at 11 years old, where there's 20, 30, 40, 50-year-old people that still don't understand that. I'm barely understanding this if we're honest. Like, yeah, I know what you're saying, and I'm like, yeah, looking back at my life, I'm like, yeah, I was the weird one. And
yeah, I was showing up to school like with like a homemade bowl cut, and like I couldn't have made it any harder for someone to approach me and be kind, or like, if my dream was like, oh, I'll go be friends with so and so, like I wouldn't have ever even given them a chance, looking back. And then I remember realizing that, and then learning quite quickly how hard it is to undo people's impressions of you, and like why it's so important to really always put your best foot forward. Not in the sense of like paint a picture that isn't true, but put your best foot forward as in like always make an effort, whether it's like, oh, I'm going to make an effort to show up and be kind to this person or authentic or whatever it is, like always make an effort. Because again, these people had known me since I was in kindergarten, and then the next day I show up to school and like I'm wearing new clothes and I'm trying to be a completely new person, and they're all just like, what are you doing, dude? You're the such and such kid, right? Like I had created expectations around who I was, not only for myself but for everyone around me. And so I remember very, very excitedly looking forward to high school of like, I can finally get lost in a sea of 1,500 new kids going to school as freshmen. I can genuinely, like, none of these people know who I used to be. So whatever I show up as is going to be who these people know me as.
Well, it's really funny because, like, I would always watch movies like The New Guy,
yeah,
and things like that, and dream about, like, because I felt the same way, and then I didn't know how to change, and like I was just like this weird loser kid, and like I would watch the movies where he could just like he would change schools and then be a different person, and like I would fantasize about that, and then just couldn't do it, and you did, essentially.
It was only because I figured it out before high school.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
that was the key.
Like I feel like a lot of people go through that from high school to college. Like they go to college and they choose to be a new person and all that. And
you get beat down in high school pretty good if you're not
yeah, even in middle
like,
school, like
if you didn't,
kids are real harsh because
totally,
they haven't had enough life to like really understand like, oh, I'm kind to people because it sucks when people aren't kind to me. Like life is sunshine and rainbows. because you're a little kid and you haven't really, maybe that's exaggerating, but like you haven't learned the golden rule enough through practice. Yeah, like most people haven't had enough chance. That's for sure. And like you said, like you weren't able to make it happen. Like I'm sure looking back, like I showed genuine signs of a psychotic breakdown. Like I remember watching movies and like taking notes or like pausing and rewinding certain scenes and like practicing human behavior like a psycho for sure. Yeah, like
which movies? Describe some movies.
I very vividly remember watching Hercules, the animated Hercules, and practicing smiling afterwards. Like, all right, he has a very like good smile. I know he's a cartoon, but like, what are the features of this smile that I like, that I want to bring forth into my high school career? And like standing in front of a mirror and like, and is it going to be like more smirky, or is it going to be like a, like I remember, and like, that's why I have such an exaggerated smle.
And it works now. Did it work then? Like, did it? I mean, it had to have.
You let me hang around. So.
Very unexcitedly, but.
Yeah, well, and I think that was kind of, I mean, to tie it into that first story from the beginning of the podcast of how, like, when we first met, like, none of my current BMX friends actually liked me. They were all kind of like, who's this weird kid? And, like, I was tenacious enough to work through I knew, like, I wasn't going to settle for anything less than y'all are going to be my friends. Like, that was the end goal. I was like, I'm going to learn how to make my own set of friends, not just these weird people that I'm stuck with for 8 years of my life because they go to the same school and it's the only people I have access to.
Because there's literally 10 people within a 10-year range that ride BMX in Parker, Colorado. Like, so it wasn't a large pool to draw from. It was literally
become friends with these people or give up on your favorite thing of all time because you're never going to be able to go to the skate park and like have a good time while they're all doing something separate. So, like, I very, very vividly remember just, like, chipping away at the mountain until I had finally buried into it. Of just, like, I'm just going to, if they want, like, any opportunity to hang out, like, I'm going to hang out. And, like, same thing with, like, I hurt myself. Like, I'm going to deal with the pain as best as I can until we leave. Like, I'm not going to out loud say, like, take me home. Like, I remember that all very vividly. If I chose, like, these people are going to be an important part of my life, whether or not they've accepted it, is kind of how it felt. Like, you're going to be my friend. You can wait.
Yeah. We just don't know
yet. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember that a lot.
That's where I'm curious. I wish we could remember how long you had to chip away at us because it
was like a solid, like, 8 months.
Because
maybe even longer.
Until that Boulder trip? You think it was 8 months from when we originally met you to that Boulder trip?
No. That was just part of the chipping away. I do remember one day we'll have to get Jarrett Litzinger on the podcast because he's like a big part of the story. But it was just raining cats and dogs, and part of the skate park was muddy because there was like not concrete everywhere. It was pretty ghetto. And I did something and slipped and fell and slid into the mud, but I had caught myself like crab walk style. But because it was so muddy, I genuinely couldn't like push to get back up, and I didn't want to sit down because I was wearing white jeans, and like Jarrett's on the other side of the skate park, and so is JT, and I'm trying to get them to help me, but they think it's the funniest thing ever because like the new kid has fallen and can't get up, and let's watch him struggle. Who wouldn't? Like, that's hilarious. And that was like the bonding moment that afterwards, like I literally remember Jarrett and JT, but very specifically Jarrett, saying like, dude, that was like the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, welcome to the crew. Like, that was the best. And then like once that little bonding moment had happened, that goodwill with them is kind of like how I got invited to like Boulder and like a couple of the other things.
Right, yeah, because it was definitely...
It was a long time before I really became...
I was probably the last one on board.
Oh, for sure. Especially after the Boulder experience, for sure. I think that was like test number 1. And then just at the point in your life that you were at, like, I was just an obstacle to you having fun that day. So, like, it's a process to kind of choose who you want to be, for sure.
I think I just thought of this. Part of the possible acceptance is because, like, I was super into filming and wanted to film, like, the craziest tricks, and you were one that wasn't necessarily afraid to send it and eat shit on stuff. So, like, if we're filming videos of like flying out of quarter pipes and maybe somebody does a tail whip and then Gavin's over here like 360ing this box jump, it's like one of the craziest things that anybody's doing. Like,
that was definitely part of it.
Okay, like, he's actually trying to send it. I should film that, and that could be part of our video.
I do think as a young kid, my high threshold for huckability definitely might have earned some childhood respect from my peers.
Yeah.
And then so to get to the second point, of like when I very vividly remember like having that aha moment of when I'm going to choose kind of the next direction or like the next, like, oh, something's wrong and I need to change it kind of moment. We had just gotten back from our trip to Australia, and while I had gone down there, I was single, you were single, and our friend Andrew was long distance dating some girl, and
he Leviked
her. I forgot about that.
Yeah, they wouldn't say I love you over Skype, so they Leviked each other.
Yep. God, that's hilarious and adorable. Yeah, so I remember, but while we were down there, we're all, early. I'm like late teens, like 19. You were probably like early 20s, and we're all single, good-looking guys who want to go meet girls and hang out and all that stuff. And I remember watching Andrew, like, everywhere he went, like, everyone was just so attracted to him. Not even in, like, a romantic way, just, like, people wanted to be around him.
Yeah.
And we had kind of experienced that firsthand when we became friends with him, because we didn't like him because he was just, like, an outsider of our skate park, and he was weird and, like, he was just a goofball. And
I don't remember not liking Andrew, to be honest. I remember liking him right away.
I remember being afraid of him is like because my only experience with friend groups is like if a new guy came in, someone had to leave. Like the pie couldn't get bigger. There was only X amount of seats at the table. You couldn't just pull up a chair, right? So I remember thinking like, I'm low man on the totem pole. This guy's I'm gonna lose all my friends. For sure, and feeling like a very scarcity mindset. Not at all what happened. We became best friends. But I remember watching all these people get incredibly drawn to him. And just everywhere we went, he seemed to get a hookup. Or not like romantically, like literally like, oh, here's a free thing. Or like everywhere we went, things just kind of like fell in line for him in a way. And like, no matter what was going on, where like you and I would be stressing over like this or that, he just wasn't. And especially when it came to women, he was constantly meeting girls, and like he was just constantly
right. The one dude that wouldn't
do
anything with these girls. Yeah,
and he was just like not trying, and he was just getting all this attention. And I remember getting stateside, and my good friend introduced me to some personal development right when I had gotten back, and it was kind of everything's getting stirred up time anyways, just because we had spent time over there and then trying to adjust to life back here and choosing where I want to go with my life, and just had another one of those moments of, oh, this is under my control, in realizing like, oh, all these girls, like my whole life I just had all these really bad experiences with women. Like me and my sister didn't grow up very close, and there was a lot of like anger in that relationship as kids, which is we've worked on a lot now as adults, which is nice because like we've both just matured out of that phase of our lives. But we certainly
shout out to Ashley, who is one of our biggest fans.
Yeah, big shout out to Ashley Malcolm. She's like really been supportive for this, and we've grown a lot closer over the last couple of years. And my mom and I had a really hard relationship growing up, and like I got cheated on by every girl I ever dated in high school, and I just remember being so hurt by all these women, and so I just didn't trust them, and I had a tremendous amount of anger there. And I remember getting back from Australia and having the same thought as in high school or in middle school, where I was like so hurt by all of these people and like, oh, I'm such a victim, and like, why are all these people being so mean to me? And then all of a sudden, same thing happens with women, where I'm like, oh, like I'm eliciting responses from them. If I change my behavior, their responses will change. Like I'm the only common denominator in my life. If I want different results, like I'm the only person who can fix that. And so that summer, like, again, just giant light bulb goes off in my head, and I get really, really into personal development. And I started reading books and listening to audios, and started reading books like How to Win Friends and Influence People, like changed my life. And this silly book called 92 Ways to Talk to Anybody. And like all of a sudden I started experiencing that life that I had watched Andrew have in Australia, where for the first time the resentment towards all of the women that I knew had gone. And all of a sudden I'm like meeting cute girls, and like I never did anything because I was still so shy, and like it felt so vulnerable, and like I was really afraid to make any moves. But for the first time in my life, I was having really pleasant, wonderful interactions with women. Within literally 3-4 months of making this realization and changing my behavior. I mean, not even a quarter of a year later, and I'm just experiencing life in a totally new way, and I'm meeting all these amazing women who, even non-romantically, I'm just having good experiences for the first time, right? And I get to like look at your mom in a new light, where all of a sudden I'm like, oh wow, like here I was, not like I never realized how amazing your mom was until like that period of my life. I just like took for granted.
Even on awesome. Cookies and brownies night?
Yeah, because like I was like, oh, she's just like buttering me up. Like never trust a woman was my mentality before that. And then I remember going to your house, you know, for like Thanksgiving and stuff afterwards, and being like, wow, Janice, greatest of all time. Like you are so kind and so giving, and it's so apparent, like the extra that you allow others to be just because of who you are. Like Bruce shows up differently because of that's Dylan's dad, differently because of who she was, and like we both showed up, and Taylor, she just brought the best out in people, and I was like, wow, like women like that exist, so that's cool. And then realizing like, oh, my Nana and Papa have been married for like 70 years. And there's like madly in love. Like, wow, this is crazy. And the more you learn, the more you learn, and the more you learn, and the more you see, and the more you see, and the more you're looking, the more that you see and you find. And literally within like 5 months of making that realization, going from the most angry, upset, resentful person in the world towards women, 5 months later, I was dating Katrina, and it was like the healthiest relationship I had ever been in to that point. And it was an awesome relationship. We were really good together. We just long term, like we were headed different ways, and we helped each other tremendously during the time we dated. But yeah, like that's how quickly life can change. At least it did for me, of just realizing like one of my favorite people in the world, Sarah Thompson, says this quote all the time. I think it's originally Tony Robbins. You are 100% responsible for your life's experience. Whatever you're experiencing, you are responsible for. you could, and that goes back to choosing joy, right? Like, if you're feeling anything, it's because of a set of choices. And real quickly, you can choose a new set of choices and feel something different, even before you start experiencing new results.
So, yeah, there's a lot there.
I know. Sorry, I get so excited. I just love to hear myself talk.
No, it's really interesting that my mom had kind of helped with your situation, because in my eyes, they were so conservative that, like, towards girls and sex and all of that, that, like, I was too afraid growing up. Like, I couldn't, all of high school, I never talked to any girls ever. Like, I was terrified because, like, my mom, I don't know what they did specifically, but it was somehow I just got this fear that, like, I wasn't good enough, that, like, I couldn't talk to girls at all. Like, it just, like, wasn't even a thing that I could do. And it, to this day, it obviously affects me huge, but I'm glad that she helped you.
Yeah. Well, and that's something, like, not to burst your bubble, but, like, you're certainly not special in that aspect. Like, we're all constantly wondering if we're enough, right? Or, like, I don't think there's anything scarier than talking to someone of the opposite sex. Period. Like, I'm married.
Realistically,
I'm
it's
married
not
to the love of my life, and every now and again, like, I'll go talk to just, like, I'll meet someone who's just, like, the most beautiful guy or girl I've ever met in my life, and it's still intimidating. Just on, like, an animal level, I'm like, they have more resources than I do. Like, so it's funny, though, because I never got anything from your mom for the majority of the time, or I guess about half and half the time that I knew your mom. There was while I was a kid, and I was so stuck in that resentment of women that she was like truly the GOAT, the greatest of all time. And I spent at least 1 or 2 days a week with her. And then all of a sudden, I realized, like, maybe I'm the one to blame for my own life. And then very quickly, she was just, like, the first person I got to see being, like, a kind, generous, like, the best a woman could be, where I was just like, wow, like, because of your femininity and because of the way that you are strong and because of the way that you support and all these gifts that your mom had, I was, for once in my life, feeling hopeful that, like, oh, they're not all bad, right? Like, as funny as that is, but I can absolutely understand how, like, your household wasn't really a place where you could learn anything about, like, relationships and stuff, because the way that your mom and dad got along was just, like, too natural, and they're not, like, big sharers of emotions.
And even, like, today, like,
of that.
I look for that, and it just doesn't
the bar was
happen,
set
and then
pretty high.
It's pretty high, and then so I set that bar high for myself, and like, it just doesn't happen. So it's weird. It's a weird dynamic that also makes me sad sometimes.
Yeah.
Going back to the very
going back to Joy Quota, and choosing to chase joy and choosing to make sure that Joy Quota is filled up, regardless of if you're sad or however you're feeling. It's pretty weird how we can have that effect on each other.
Right. It's so funny that my parents had such this impact on you.
Yeah, they were the first, like, couple I really knew that were, like, so madly in love and, like, respected and took care of each other. Also, Andrew's parents to some degree, but not. They were, like, the second people I met, or, like, I just spent so much time with your parents because I worked at your dad's house for so long at his machine shop, that I just saw a dynamic that I'd never been exposed to. But it was right when I started, because I started working for your dad, right when I started looking for people who had that dynamic so I could figure out what they were doing. So it was just like so unbelievably influential, because it was like, man, I really want to learn, just like how I wanted to learn how to ride BMX. And then like a month later, I meet Yellow Designs, and then Yellow becomes like the biggest part of my life ever. Mm-hmm. And he's like a second dad, right? Like it just the right example at the right time. Which kind of leads me to another point, that what you're looking for, you'll find, right? Like I was looking for, or I'd convinced myself of, all women are people who can't be trusted and they're always trying to take from me. And then I spent 5 years spending all this time with a woman who I later find out changed what I thought of women and like how much they could be and what they're capable of. And she never went anywhere. I was talking to your mom on a weekly basis. I just wasn't looking for it, so I couldn't see it. And I think that's what happens with joy. I'm always looking for joy. So like when I made that big choice to, I'm going to change, like I'm the common denominator. I'm responsible for my own life. I remember telling myself day in and day out, I am an unstoppable force of love, joy, and enthusiasm. And then it turned to passion. Now I'm an unstoppable force of love, joy, and passion. And literally all of a sudden I started seeing what I was looking for. Versus before, when I felt like life was happening to me, and I felt, so angry and frustrated all the time. I was looking for reasons to be angry and frustrated. So like now, the job that I'm 2 days away from leaving, even though it's crazy frustrating and there's all kinds of things that drive me nuts about it, probably 3-4 times a week, I leave the job site just not able to stand from laughing so hard for 8 hours and like really being in a joyful place, even though the whole day I'm like frustrated and I feel, angry at points and like all of that. I'm still living in a joyful place, to kind of tie it back into what we're going to with making sure that you fill that joy quota. And it is a choice, and it's because I started finally looking for it.
I mean, are there little things like that people can do? Like,
yeah,
because it's hard, if not impossible, for somebody to just like say like, oh, I'm going to choose joy. I'm going to wake up one day and just choose joy. Like,
absolutely.
What are some little things that people can do? Like, I know gratitude is huge. Like, being grateful for the things that you do have is actually really helpful.
Yeah.
In being appreciative and bringing yourself joy. But do you have any ideas on some, like, it can't just be an overnight thing?
No,
right?
No. The choice takes not even a second, because you feel like a different person after you've really chosen anything, whether it's you've chosen yes or no, or I'm choosing joy, or I'm choosing to be depressed, like whatever it is. Like if you make any sort of a choice, it only takes a second, but it takes a while for the results to show up and for your surroundings to match it. I like to think of joy as like dessert. You can make dessert 1,000 different recipes. There's millions of recipes for dessert. There are countries where you put sugar on crickets and that's dessert. And it's like a delicacy, right? Like dessert can be anything. But the more recipes you know to make dessert, the easier it is to have dessert. And that's kind of how joy is, right? Like I started like for me it was easy because I had BMX and it just brought me so much joy. It brings me so much joy that man, that was like day number one. Like I made a decision, and then I just started looking for like where joy was something I was experiencing, and then kind of reverse engineered it, right? Like, oh man, I'm always joyful when I'm at the skate park. All right. Even when you're broken and you just hucked something that you shouldn't have, and you broke your bike or any of the other things that could have happened, yep, 100% joyful. Even though you're frustrated and sad and a little hopeless because you didn't have money to fix your bike, definitely. This is all internal dialogue. So then I was like, cool. Clearly, BMX brings me joy. So, and if I need joy, that's recipe number one. I can go to the skate park and find joy. And I used that all the time through getting me through high school of like, girl broke up with me, skate park, or tests weren't going well or anything. Like I was just, skate park was like recipe number one, easy. I don't even need to use the measuring cups anymore. Like I just know all the ingredients. Like you said, gratitude is probably the easiest. Looking back, like that's for sure the easiest, fastest way to change your state to a place that's much closer to joy, if not finding joy and filling that joy quota. Gratitude and humor. If you can find something that'll make you laugh when you don't want to laugh, that will be worth all the joy quota points in the world, for sure. Like for a while I had a video on YouTube of some SNL skit that just killed me every time. Didn't matter if I watched it back to back. It was just as funny the second time. And I remember that was one of my recipes. If I was frustrated and I had 3 minutes, I would go watch that SNL, and before I knew it, I was laughing, and totally different experience. Here I am finding joy. And even if it just cracked the door to where joy is, it cracked the door, and then all of a sudden I saw like joy in there, having a good time, and all right, like, well, what if I had another bite, or I tried a different dessert, and then the door cracked open a little more, and I could finally walk into the room where joy was.
See, that's one thing though that gets tough, and perhaps why this binge watching thing has become such an issue is like, I got home the other day and I was like frustrated and didn't want to do anything. So then you sit down on the couch and you put on an episode of whatever funny thing is your thing. And then for whatever reason in my brain, I cannot binge. So I'm fortunate in that, as like one episode and I'm done and I have to get up and do something else. But it would be easy. It's like, I'm feeling good. Like I just laughed a bunch when I was feeling shitty and now I feel good. It'd be so easy to just let it roll over to the next one and then the next one and the next one. And thankfully I don't do that, but I understand how this has become a thing for people that rely on that humor or whatever it is, that feeling that they get from watching somebody else. And I don't know. I don't know why I'm like that, where I can't. I've like never literally one time, maybe ever, I've watched 2 episodes of a show in a row. Like I just can't do it. Like no matter how entertained I am by it, I just cannot do it. I don't know why, and I'm actually thankful for it because, like I don't want to spend my life watching TV. But I can understand, like I feel like for people that can do it, because I understand how easy it would be to just, like Netflix, you can literally sit there for day. 12 hours and watch an entire season.
Yeah, that's where, like you said, it is a slippery slope. I recommend, if you're going to use humor instead of gratitude and like find a laugh, like I said, I made my go-to laugh was a 3-minute video. So at the end of the video, like there was nothing more. It's not an episode. It's not a cliffhanger. It's not trying to pull me into it. Like it was a very cut, small little thing, right? Anything that like why we get so sucked into TV. Like, I'm one of those people who could absolutely binge watch, all day. But
you watch shows about like houses and stuff.
Yeah, because I love it.
It
brings me a lot of joy, actually, watching those house shows, because I get to start dreaming about my house, and it becomes like about me, and my brain's on overdrive of like, oh, that'll be a part of our future house. But the problem is if you feel yourself getting numb, right? Like, if you're trying to, if you start feeling kind of numb, like, oh, like that's not joy. You can't feel you can't feel numb and feel joy. Like, by definition, you're not feeling anything. And not feeling anything is a sign that something's wrong. Right?
But
like,
feeling nothing is better than feeling sad.
No.
In some people's minds. Not in reality.
That's the trap.
Not in reality.
For sure, that's the trap.
In people's minds, I think that is.
Oh, for sure. And I felt that way for a long time. In my heart of heart, I knew that was true for a long time. That goes back to the different flags on a racetrack of like what emotions are. Like, if I'm feeling numb, that to me is like the biggest of all of the red flags that I could ever get in my life. Is if I'm feeling numb, that's the biggest. Like, nothing else in my life is more of a priority than figuring out why and changing it. Because numb means nothing's working. Even sad means something's working. Like, there's something to go off of. But numb, like, you don't even know if you're happy. Like, that's like when you've really... so that's something I've trained myself. And again, trained is the right word. Like, it's a skill over time I've built of anytime I feel myself feeling numb or trying to numb something, that's a big red flag. Like, Allie and I have a joke between us that we have a rule: no sad drinking. If you're sad and the only reason you're drinking is because you're sad and you don't want to feel sad anymore, like, no sad drinking. You're not allowed to. We won't let each other. We won't let ourselves. I won't let usually like other friends, if I'm around them and I notice it, like, hey, you're cut off. Like, you can't just drink instead of feeling what you're feeling. Like, feel it so we can figure out how to change what you're feeling. So like, oftentimes feeling numb can seem like a better option than feeling maybe a negative emotion, but it's, to me anyways, far worse. I guess we've been going at it for a while. Something I want to bring up is just like what joy quota means to you and like what it means to fill your joy quota. Like, that's something I don't think we've ever taken like the proper time to explain what the joy quota is, because everyone has one, and unfortunately a lot of people's quota isn't getting met. The same way that you have like vitamins that you need to be intaking every day and protein amounts that you need and all that stuff.
Yeah, and we kind of touched on in the beginning of like, it doesn't need to be something extreme. Like, for us, it has become extreme. Like, it's not going to be exciting for us to, do, I don't know, something silly. But so we need to be like jumping 20-foot dirt jumps on our BMX bikes or hanging off cranes or whatever. But it doesn't need to be that. We can also have game night, and that fills a joy quota huge. And like hanging out with our best friends and stuff like that is so important and fills the joy quota just as much as any other thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Going back to like ways, like if you're just now making this choice of choosing joy and trying to kind of take ownership of your own life and choose joy and gratitude and all that stuff, quick way to fill the joy quota is just do something new. Like, the smaller the better. The other day, I just ordered a burger off of a menu without taking all the stuff I wanted off of it. and like felt such a tremendous amount of emotions, and like there's excitement, there's fear, there's anticipation, and like pride of not doing it. And like I pointed that out to Allie, like, look who didn't change his order. And like,
but wasn't any good?
Yeah, it was fine. I mean, it was.
Would it have been better though if you had taken the things off?
I don't know. I probably would have liked it more. It was not a great burger in general, which I was a little bummed on. But like, I was more excited about the fact that I did something new and I pushed myself, even though it's literally like just the other day to get that same emotion, I jumped a 30-foot dirt jump or however big that thing was. It was massive.
I think it was 27.
It was 27-foot dirt jump and got all broke off. But I got a small chunk of that by just ordering a burger and not changing it to like exactly what I wanted. I just was like, yeah, I'll just trust the chef. So continue, but that's just something that popped in my head of like,
no, I was just going to insult because we've been doing bacon cheeseburger Friday for over a year. We've made
hundreds of bacon
cheeseburgers. We're pretty good at it. Honestly, there's not really a restaurant that can compete with us. So it's just anytime I go to order a cheeseburger at a restaurant, it's disappointing.
Yeah.
Shake Shack is good. In-N-Out is good.
Wasn't a fan.
Really?
Yeah.
What did you get?
I mean, this is so off topic. We're not going to get into it.
Okay.
But yeah.
No, they have some decent stuff. It
wasn't bad, but like it just, I don't know. There was a lot of hype.
You're not drinking for May, so it helps if you go after drink.
But yeah, back to your point of like, we do anything we can to fill the Joy Quota, and some things are worth more points than others. Like,
well, yeah, it's like the thermometer full of money at elementary school where you try and donate to the whatever you're donating to. You have to just consistently keep putting it in, and it just keeps raising it.
Yeah, and then you'll take, like, it's almost like a bank account in that sense of, like, you always have to be putting into this Joy Quota account because there are days where, like, she dumps you or he dumps you or you get fired or, like, it's just been a hard day at work and you have to take a withdrawal. Like, you have to bring some joy from the account and use it and spend it just to, like, get through the day. You know, it's kind of how I picture it. So, like, if you're not constantly putting into it, it just won't have enough, and you'll overdraw, and that's where, like, depression shows up.
My bank account is always empty, so I can't speak to that necessarily. I don't feel like depression is the right word for that.
Yeah, maybe that's strong.
Qualified sadness.
Yeah, I mean, but sadness...
You deserve to be sad when you...
Well,
I don't know.
I'm just meaning like the Joy Quota account.
Yeah.
Like if you're not constantly filling that
it just hit
thermometer,
close to home because...
Yeah, you're going through a rough patch.
You compared it to a bank account, and I don't think that's... I think the thermometer at school where you're trying to fill the thing with donations is the better way than the bank account.
Whichever metaphor you like best, comment below. And no, like you said there, the big thing is like you just constantly have to put in, and like there are some days where like we go build a snow bike, and then there are other days where like we build a snow bike but you hurt your back and so you can't ride it. So you have to put in just less than you were hoping for. But
right, riding that roller coaster is the thing that I still struggle with, of like we build it up to go so high. It goes so high of like sledding off the roof of our house or doing whatever crazy thing we do, and then when we're not doing that is when I feel the saddest, because like I just want to be doing that all the time, but realistically you just can't. Like you cannot feel it, and it would be boring if it was a straight line. Like if it was always going up and up and up and up and up, like it just couldn't. You die. You just like get to the point of where you're. That's why all these base jumpers die, is because they like are constantly trying to go up.
Yeah, I mean,
and then they kill themselves.
Yeah, I mean that's where the work lies, right? And that's where choosing joy as a skill is, like, that's the bulk of the work, right? Is being able to find joy in a smile, or like today at a job that I don't care about, I did a really good job on what I was doing, and I'm still pumped on it. Like, that was a huge deposit into the Joy Quota account. Is I just did what I was supposed to do, and I did it well, and I was proud of myself, right? Like, if you're experiencing that roller coaster to the degree of, like, it's much, much harder to find joy just because you're not doing something insane, it's because some part of joy for you is still probably tied up in an external factor versus it being, like, in a perfect world, like, I'm certainly not there, but in a perfect world, joy is something that you are constantly manufacturing, and, like, no matter what is going on outside, it wouldn't affect where your joy is at.
So do you, like, think about these moments that bring you joy in times of doubt or downness?
And just remembering that it's not all supposed to be up helps me a lot. Because, again, being someone who experiences so much love and joy and extra all the time, when it's not there is, like, crippling. Like, I go through a couple pretty low points a year, if I'm being honest. Usually just for a couple days or like a week, where it can be really hard. I mean, a perfect example actually is Allie and I didn't get to go to Mexico because there was a quote-unquote blizzard that happened, and Southwest shut down all of their planes because of the 737 thing, and we just fully missed a trip that this was going to be our first trip ever, really, as a couple that wasn't based around, like, some sort of business. And we had worked our tails off getting scuba certified. We were going to go scubaing in the ocean. It was going to be this amazing trip. We get to celebrate
honeymoon,
our friends.
if I'm not mistaken.
It was technically our honeymoon. We were going to get to go see our friends John and Haley get married, like, see a whole bunch of other friends that we normally don't get to see. We'd been looking forward to this for like 6-7 months. And just like that, it's over. And I went through, like, a real rough, like, as silly as it sounds, like, couple hours. And you and Allie came in, and I was literally just, like, laying on the floor in the dark, just, like, staring at the ceiling, like, man, like, I've fully failed as, like, a husband. I haven't created enough resource that, like, we could pay whatever it took to get to Mexico and, like, find some sort of a flight out.
Charter a private jet.
Yeah, exactly. Like, as silly as it sounds, like, that's where my head went, and I just felt, like, so low. So those moments are normal. But also because of that, like, we had the best weekend ever, and I don't think I would have experienced I wouldn't have known what that high really felt like of all the fun stuff that we on purpose made sure that we had an awesome week despite not being able to go, specifically because we weren't going to let the fact that we were going to choose joy. And so I'm working on, I'm certainly not there, of getting grateful for the lows. Like, while I'm experiencing it, like, thanking it, the experience of, like, man, like, it sucks that I have no money right now. 'Cause, man, it is going to feel so good when I can go help someone who's going through this later, because I just have tons of extra. Like, if I had just always had extra, I wouldn't get to know what it really feels like. And I wouldn't know how much it means when I walk up to, like, some kid that I'm mentoring, and they're broke and they're young and they're going for it, and I just get to bless them by, like, paying them exorbitantly for what they do best. And, like, letting them earn it, but for sure helping them. Like, that is going to be just so rewarding. Or, like, man, I think part of the relationship that I have with Allie and like the love that we've created and in this relationship that we've made, I wouldn't be capable of experiencing if it hadn't been for all the horrible relationships that I had.
Yeah.
And like, that was a big part of my journey, is like coming to like grateful for all of those experiences really allowed me to grow in that way. So like, that would be my encouragement anyways, is just like, if you can, while you're doing something mellow or like you're not out adventuring and you're just at the house, it's like, all right, like this is a moment for me to be at the house. Like, what can I do at the house to just put like 1 point, $5 in the thermostat, right? Like, I think the trap that you've fallen into is you're only interested in the high ticket items, right? Like, I'm only shooting 3-pointers, but that's not going to win a basketball game.
That's fair.
Yeah, and like, I feel like it sounds like I'm like pointing a finger. Like, that's something I went through a lot, still go through, right? Of like, while I was sitting on the deck of a 30-foot roll-in of jumps that I probably shouldn't have been jumping, all that was going through my head was like, this is worth a lot of points if you send it, you know? So there
is an excess, like you can...
Oh, for sure. That's where addiction and like a lot of stuff comes from, where someone is like, you know, that's where like a lot of people's need for drugs come in. It's like, they're under the assumption that that'll be worth more points, because the endorphins in their brains and all that stuff. But that leading back to like, the small things matter just as much. Another quick way to fill up the joy quota is do something for someone. Like, some of the most joyful moments in my marriage have been like me losing my mind around the house, just bored crazy, until I'm finally so bored that I clean the house because I know that Allie will appreciate it. And then 5 minutes into cleaning the house, again, motion is emotion. Motion is emotion. If you say it fast, it doesn't sound like anything. All of a sudden, 5 minutes into it, all I'm thinking is like, man, this is going to change Allie's day. And like, sure enough, just the other night, you and I cleaned the house for like 15 minutes and swept the floor. And it didn't seem like anything, but she actually noticed, and she came in and she's like, thank you. Like, did you guys clean? Like, the house looks nice and I feel so wonderful. Like, thank you. I feel loved. And I was like, boom, joy quota met, right? Like, so it doesn't take big things. And when you're starting this process, start with the easy things, the low-hanging fruit, like being grateful and doing things for others, and it'll naturally kind of crack open the door to joy, and then, you know, where it lives, and then just kind of reflect on your life and where you see some of the big ticket items for yourself, like I did with BMX, where it was so obvious, like, that's a big one. That's worth a lot of points. And that's kind of the secret, at least in my mind.
Oh, that's epic. I can't think of anything else. So
sweet. Well, I'd like to end just because normally we say like, what is like the memory that joy, or like when you think of joy, what does that look like? But we just recently had our friends interview us on the podcast, and that, well, like, we don't want to say it twice. So what would be fun for me anyways is what is something that you're looking forward to from Joy Quota? Like, outside of like, hopefully we can make a living doing this, because that's the goal for us, for everyone, is to do something that they're passionate about well enough that they can make a living doing it. What's like something you're excited about for the future, whether it's 5 years from now, 10 years from now, just something that Joy Quota could potentially create?
I mean, I really just like hearing from people that we've inspired. Like, it's one at a time right now, which is still awesome. Every single person that can, like, every once in a while I'll get a call from a friend who finally listens to a podcast and actually enjoyed it and like helped them through a time or whatever, but just enjoyed it or watched a specific video and liked it or inspired is the best way to like inspired someone to do something that they normally wouldn't. That's what I like. And if we can keep that going and expand that, then we'll be successful. Like that to me is a huge success, to just keep inspiring people to get out of their comfort zone and do something they normally wouldn't do. To me is a win. I look forward to that.
Heck yeah. I couldn't have said it better myself. Well, awesome. Thank you guys for listening to us ramble a bit. I had a blast chatting with you guys, and with it just being me and Dylan, like I feel like that was something that we've both wanted to do, and so grateful to finally get to do this. So,
thanks for listening.
Boom.